Hello everyone, I'm Casey McGregor, your host for today, and welcome to the second episode of the Stardom TI Official Podcast, here on Spotify and YouTube. In today's episode, we'll be talking about a brand new novel which is now premiered on Wattpad, in addition to some of the latest gaming news from all corners of the industry. Okay, well, without further ado, let's get into the first headline. Okay, I'm thrilled to announce that the prologue of a new novel, Bloons Tower Defense 6 Rise of Gwendolin, has been recently published for free on Wattpad. So, I'd like to explain where this particular project is coming from to start with. So, in my personal life, even back in school, and I'm sure many people can agree with this, playing Bloons Tower Defense on coolmathgames.com using school computers was awesome. And Ninja Kiwi, the developers behind this series, have continued to release new sequels and spin-offs throughout the years, with the 4th and 5th installments of the main series being unavailable on Cool Math Games, which did have the first 3 installments, but rather exclusive to the Ninja Kiwi website when playing on a browser. But these 2 games in particular were also available on smartphones, and Bloons Tower Defense 5 was also available as a PC application, I believe, and is also available on the Nintendo Switch, interestingly enough. But the biggest upgrade to the series mechanics have come with Bloons Tower Defense 6, the latest installment of the main series. Main point, the previous 2D graphics and animations have been updated to new 3D models for the first time. And Bloons Tower Defense 6 has so much new stuff over even its predecessor, with new towers, ample new upgrades, and many improvements to online functionality, both competitive and co-op. An interesting inclusion, though, was the introduction of heroes, which are basically new monkey characters that have actual names, personalities, and even voice clips. The way these heroes work in the game is that you pick one to take into a map session with you, and they do cost in-game money just like all towers do to place. But of course, this money can be earned very quickly by just popping the balloons in the single session. Monkey money, however, was another big addition, which is purchasable currency that can be used to unlock new heroes, among other things. But I'm not here to spend an hour talking about the game. I'm here to talk about how it fits into this new novel. So when I look at the game, which is very fun indeed, I still can't help but notice potential for a fleshed out storyline, or like a story mode, particularly for Bloons Tower Defense 6, with the introduction of heroes and also the inclusion of boss Bloons, which were first introduced as events in Bloons Monkey City, which was a spin-off of Bloons Tower Defense 5, but they have returned here also as events. So basically, I've fabricated a storyline based on this game surrounding the pyromaniac hero of the game, Gwendolin, who was also one of the launch heroes. She's basically a female monkey with a flamethrower as her primary weapon, and I thought I would start with her as the protagonist of this novel. For the conflict, with no genuine story surrounding the games, I had to come up with some original concepts. Specifically, a monkey mad scientist who will serve as the main antagonist and creator of the Bloons in the story. His name is Dr. Bloonipus. So basically, the story is like a coming-of-age narrative for Gwendolin, who helps take back Monkeyopolis, the former home of the monkeys prior to Dr. Bloonipus taking over the city with the Bloons. It is also implied in the prologue that the Bloons and monkeys have been in conflict for some time to implicitly canonize all the previous games in the series as well. So, I won't say any more for now, but I will quickly delve into the content classification of this novel. I'm aiming with this one for a slightly younger audience than Sonic Revolution and Franklin An Unlikely Hero, which are both aimed at young adult audiences and up, or M16+ in accordance with the fiction rating system. For Bloons Tower Defense 6 Rise of Gwendolin, however, I'll be aiming for a T13+ rating, as to bring my writing to a younger audience without being restricted to an overly childish story to appeal to all ages. Also, I'm not very good at children's writing, so I'm not even going to try and go there just yet. So, Bloons Tower Defense 6 Rise of Gwendolin is now available on Wattpad, with the prologue currently published and further chapters coming soon, alongside new chapters for Sonic Revolution and Franklin An Unlikely Hero, of course. If this first Bloons Tower Defense 6 fan novel is successful enough as well, I am willing to explore this story further through the lens of further hero characters from the game. Other heroes will appear in this story, but not as main characters, with Gwendolin obviously taking the front role this time around. Well, that's all for this announcement for now, so on to the next Stardom TI headline for this week. Now, for the second announcement today, I'd like to begin by discussing a particular pet peeve I've seen in the book industry. This is the inherent lack of a standardized content classification system for written literature in the same degree as what is enforced for films, television series, and video games. Now, I'm not going to claim that any of the others have internationally standardized systems either, but most major nations at least have their own domestic systems. Now, with books, especially ebooks, I'm aware there are some distinct rating systems such as fiction ratings, but the majority of these systems are only used by a few sites, and none of them are standardized or legally enforced, with enforcement of a selected rating system pretty much left up to the moderators of the site. And this situation is even worse for physical books and brick and mortar bookstores. Libraries and bookstores have no standard for classifying books apart from genre and general audience, as far as I know. Probably the worst part of this end of the spectrum is the lack of a stamped classification on the front cover to be visible at a glance, like with DVDs or video games. In particular, I've found myself in a situation which can be easily solved by this kind of content transparency. Sonic Revolution is a novel aimed at young adults over the age of 16. This is due to the darker and more mature tone of the storyline. However, without a standardized classification stamp containing information about adult themes and such, this novel could one day end up in the hands of a young child, say 10 years old, who is an unsuspecting fan of Sonic the Hedgehog, the series the novel is based on. What then? That child reads the novel and possibly finishes, confused or perhaps bothered by the darker themes and content within the storyline. To avoid this kind of predicament, I've been working on a new content classification system to be rolled out as standard across all novels and future publications from Stardom TI Publishing, with the future intent of pushing this system into the mainstream book market. I've called this system the literature rating system, and it consists of 7 distinct ratings. These ratings are PS for preschool, PR for primary, T for teen, YA for young adult, E for explicit, ME for morbidly explicit, and NF for non-fiction. These ratings and their age brackets are loosely based on the fiction rating system, with NF added for non-fiction works. The parallels are as follows. PS is similar to K5+, PR is similar to K+, which is like 9+, T shares its letter with the same fiction rating, T13+, YA is pretty much the parallel to M16+, E would be like the MA18+, and finally ME mimics the heavier content of MA+, which is also 18+, but it's basically has some differences. Now, I'll be working on a further overview video which will be available on the official Stardom TI YouTube channel once complete, and we'll delve further into the particulars of each rating, including the key differences between explicit and morbidly explicit content. As for our current catalogue of novels, Sonic Revolution and Franklin, An Unlikely Hero will be reclassified as young adult for audiences 16 and over, and the newly released Bloons Tower Defense 6 Rise of Gwendolin will be classified as teen for audiences 13 and over. There are no current plans for works rating below teen or above young adult at this stage, but future updates will come with the announcement of a novel which meets higher or lower classification standards. Any future authors who choose to have their works published by Stardom TI Publishing in the future will also be held to these content classification standards. Now, with that announcement out of the way, let's get into some of the latest gaming news. Okay, today marks the release of the highly anticipated sequel, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom for Nintendo Switch, which is the sequel to 2017's Switch launch title, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Definitely check this game out when you can. Numerous trailers have been released in anticipation for the game, and I'm sure it will be an unmatched experience for Nintendo gamers. We also have news regarding a report that Game Freak, the developers of the Pokemon franchise, are developing a new action-adventure IP currently titled Project Blue. This new project is not going to be published by Nintendo, as you might think, but rather by Private Division, which is a publishing division of Take-Two Interactive. This actually sounds rather exciting, and appears to be completely distinct from Pokemon, which is obviously their most well-known IP published by Nintendo. Also, apparently Ed Boon, creator of the Mortal Kombat franchise, is teasing the potential announcement of Mortal Kombat 12 on Twitter. In the aftermath of Warner Bros. Discovery CEO David Zaslav, if I pronounced that right, informing investors at a February earnings call that the anticipated next entry in the Mortal Kombat series was being planned for release this year. Look forward to further news on that. as it does sound exciting to get even more brutal action and more fatalities, of course. That's all for our gaming news for this episode. Well, that's all for today's episode of the Stardom TI Official Podcast. Make sure to follow the podcast if you're on Spotify, or subscribe to the Stardom TI YouTube channel if you're on YouTube, and also check out Sonic Revolution, Franklin and Unlikely Hero, and Bloons Tower Defense 6, Rise of Gwendolin on Wattpad now, with new chapters to come for all of these novels in the future. Also stay tuned for the upcoming premiere of the Sonic Revolution bonus audiobook, which will be exclusive to Spotify at this stage. This has been Casey McGregor for the Stardom TI Official Podcast, and I'll see you all in the next episode.